Hello and welcome to Auto Arcadia, where we discuss all the weird and wonderful aspects of car culture. I'm your host, Thomas Hope, and
You're the other host, Colin. So, what are we going to be talking about today, Tom?
well, Colin, I'm looking at our expertly handcrafted notes, and it says JDM equals overpriced and overhyped. And to be honest, I can't think of a more succinct way of putting today's topic that we want to talk about, which is that true? Do you agree? Is JDM overhyped? Do you pay the JDM tax for kinda know that much?
I have quite a strong opinion on this, as I'm sure you're well aware, Tom.
Yeah,
Um, and
I think I do know what your opinion might be, but we'll go through it nonetheless. And I'm just reading our notes. I don't really even know where to start, but I think maybe we should probably start by like kind of categorizing what we mean by this and what era we're kind of talking about with JDM. And then that kind of leads us probably quite nicely into one of the things that I think is a factor in why JDM cars are becoming so expensive and kind of like they're becoming almost kind of commodities to be collected.
yeah, man, they're not really jumping and drive anymore. Like
No.
when you're paying 9 times what a car was when it was brand new, it's not. Yeah, it's a speculative purchase at this point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it seems that every kind of generation of car goes through it as well. But let's focus on them. So, what would you say is the kind of the era of JDM cars that are most affected? Because to be honest, no one's really paying a kind of JDM tax for like a Nissan Qashqai. Like
No.
you can get them dirt cheap. Like no one gives a shit.
And the day they do is the day I throw my keys in the fucking river. Let me assure you.
I
No,
love it when they're white because it's just the color of a white. It's just a white good. It's
it's
just
like
in that flat white color. And you're like, yeah, that's about right.
it's fucking mediocrity incarnate. That's what it is.
Oh, they're
Um,
so aggressively bland as well. They don't do anything.
no, they're exceptionally turd-like. But what you did ask there, so in a phrase, it's the PlayStation generation. That is what we're talking about here. That sort of 89 to 2002, maybe 2005, an absolute push. But that's peak JDM era, sort of from R32 GTR through to RX7 Spirit Type A FD3S. You know that chassis code. That's kind of for me what this is.
Yeah, I would broadly agree. I mean, I think you kind of nailed it. And yeah, the PlayStation generation. There's I don't know. There's quite a lot of discussion to be had, I would say, around the influence of racing games, specifically through like the PS1 and the PS2 and stuff like that.
Yeah, we're looking at you, Gran Turismo
We
2.
are looking at you.
Yeah.
It's the giant polyphony in the room. I mean, I loved Gran Turismo. I didn't play the first one very much because I didn't actually own it. I had to borrow that. But I played the second one and beyond a lot. 4 was definitely my favorite. 4 was just the biggest game ever.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to disagree because, I mean, not on the Gran Turismo thing. Like, Gran Turismo 2 was a fucking masterpiece, and anyone that disagrees with that, I will die on this hill. But I got out of the PlayStation after that, and I was a Forza man, so I can't speak to the later ones, I'm afraid. But yeah, no, Gran Turismo 2, like that Pikes Peak Suzuki,
Yeah,
yeah,
just ricocheting off the walls.
that's the one. Like you didn't really steer, you just aimed it at the barrier, and it was like a roller coaster. You just followed the track.
Oh, I could still hear that generic tire screeching sound, like the clunk noise you would get when you hit something, and the tire screeching sound just over and over in my head.
Actually, this is quite an interesting fact. Sorry, listeners, get used to this. We go off topic quite a lot. So in racing games, do you know how complicated the physics behind a tire is? Like to try and model that.
Yeah, they're
Like,
still trying to get that kind of right, you know?
yeah, Like, and there's this. It's like it's so incredibly complicated because there's so much deflection and there's so much bending and there's flex, twist, and there's friction and the lack of friction and everything else. But there's the actual super simplified formula that they use for every racing game. Forza 2 Motorsport was the one that changed this. They came up with their own one, and it's called Pace Jack's formula, and that's why, like, when you look at sort of from Gran Turismo 1 up to sort of Forza Motorsport 1 Forza, that's why the handling is so similar across all games, is because they all use this common interface formula for tire dynamics and physics. And that's why there was, like, the actual hard fact of the matter is every game for like 20 or 30 years, well, not 20 or 30 years, but like from early 90s to early 2000s, they all used this Pace Jacks formula, and that's what the tire physics were built around. Just a little bit of interesting, useless knowledge for you there.
I did not know that. That was not what I expected to learn today at all. But fair enough. Yeah, they do. I mean, like, certainly the early Gran Turismos do feel very, very similar. They feel floaty from my recollection. There's not that much feedback. But then again, it is like, early PlayStation. There wasn't really that much feedback in any of the games. Yeah,
How did I know that?
How did we get here? Where are we?
Yeah, we were discussing the influences of, like, well, why Gran Turismo and, as partner in crime, Sony are responsible for making cars of our youth objectively unobtainium.
Yes, yeah, I suppose it's all that childhood. So you were saying it's nostalgia in a way.
Yeah, but I mean, I have to say, like, if it wasn't for Gran Turismo, and it's really media, I think, but I think this was the first kind of instance of gaming creating that hype. Because, like, I remember, like, the R34 GTR and those tail lights going down the test track in Gran Turismo 2 and how fucking mental it was at the time. And it felt groundbreaking. Like, as a 10-year-old kid playing this, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want one of these when I grow up. And then you grow up and they're like, unobtainium. It's like, oh, I can have that, or I can have a 3-bedroom semi.
Yeah, but they never used to be that price, which is why they were kind of, I don't know, it's the fact that more people have money now that want them is driving up the price.
Yeah, I mean, you've got it's like the 40 plus crowd who were in their shitbox first cars when these were all kicking about, and when they saw them in the flesh, it was a big thing. Like, they've now got real cash money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of what's doing it. Pretty much the same problem that Ford's had about 15 years back.
Yeah, no, I totally, I do think that is a kind of big part of it, is that, like, the childhood poster generation or video game generation then can suddenly afford them. But they're, of course, because they're old as fuck and no one's wanted them for years, what's left isn't that much.
No, I mean, it's supply outstrips demand to a certain extent.
Definitely. And then there's the hype as well.
Yeah.
Because there is quite a bit of hype around JDM cars. And, do you think that might have something to do with, like, the fact that, video games, basically?
Yeah. I would say media, because, I mean, Fast and the Furious has a lot to answer for here as well.
Yeah, actually, yes. Yeah, looking at you, Mark IV Supra, on that.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. Even the R34, I that was one of the absolutely up there for me when I was younger, but now I'm not that massively interested in it. I don't think it looks as good as I used to think it looks, and I don't know, it just seems quite big and, like, heavy for a car,
Yeah, I'll give you that. Do you know, this actually tracks back to a conversation me and you had standing outside my garage the last time we were down. And that is, like, I don't know where to go, because I've had all these Japanese cars. I had them before they were stupid money. And I've not had all of them, but I've had a fair portion of them.
Yeah, you've had a good selection for sure.
Yeah, the average number's a lot higher than most average numbers. But, like, having had Supras and stuff, where do I go now? Like, it's all lateral. Exotica is the only place left to go, and really the only thing that interests me is a Porsche 911. So, like, I was there, but now I've left the JDM thing. Like, I'm not actually interested in it anymore, which is actually quite a strange thing.
Do you think is it that you've experienced enough of it and now you want something new, or do you think you've actually just outgrown it?
Do you know what, man? That's a really good question. Like, because see when I jump into a Supra now, I'm just like, this is so fucking utterly bland inside. Well, actually, that's a bad example because Supras have a really nice interior. The way it's all focused at the driver, it's like sitting in a cockpit. But
Yeah.
like jumping into a 90s, a Skyline, for example, it's like jumping into a 30-year-old minicab. There's no objective difference. It's all horrible grey plastic that creaks and squeaks and isn't very nice on the eye. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan anymore. It feels like I've kind of outgrown them, man. Which is actually what you said. What do you think on that? It's actually a really, really good question.
Yeah, I mean, I've not really owned. Well, I've owned one. Yeah, I owned the MR2 for a while, and I loved it. But I don't. The cars, a lot of the kind of like really iconic cars, don't interest me as much as they used to anymore because like maybe I'm kind of leaving that kind of nostalgia for them from video games and like childhood and looking at them and being like, wow, that's such a cool car. Like, for example, the RX-7, right? I really like that car. I think it looks great. I love the engine. Like, I would love to have a go with one, but I don't know if I'd really want to own one. Like, it's not something that I feel kind of drawn to.
Yeah, like if you could borrow it for like 36 hours with absolutely zero consequences to your actions for 36 hours, you'd be like, fuck yeah, they're not my Apex seals. I don't have to rebuild this heap of shit. Let's rock.
I mean, yeah, if you'd given me those terms for almost borrowing almost anything, I would have accepted them. They were very generous. Just do what you
That
want
is
for
fair.
36 hours. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'll give you that one. I was a bit generous with terms there, wasn't I?
So yeah,
But
so
no,
maybe I think we've established that we're not kind of on the JDM hype wagon.
not anymore. I was like if you came to me before I bought my first house, when I had my Supra and like when I had Sorars and J body Toyotas, that was my vice in life. If it was a J body Toyota, I was all about it. But yeah, like back then, if you showed me a Porsche 911 and a Toyota and a Mark IV Supra, I'd be like, oh my god, man, the Mark IV Supra, bro. And it's like I look back on it now and I'm just like, what a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
I could have had a 911 when they were affordable.
Yeah, and you were just never drawn to it.
Well, I am. I'm now questioning all my previous life choices on that little bombshell. But yeah, no, like I don't know. It's a funny old thing, and you get blinded by it. So you do, definitely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I remember like speaking to you a fair few years ago, and you were like all about the JDM. Like you just anything that's Japanese, you were kind of like up for. Japanese and interesting, anyways. Whereas I went kind of exactly the opposite way because I got bit by the German whip. I do quite like German whip.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
do.
I don't like owning them particularly because they're really fucking expensive when they break, and they break all the fucking time, and access to anything is a pain in the arse because of packaging. I, I don't know why that made me so angry. I think
Oh
it's a real
no.
problem with German cars is that they like to just squeeze as much gear everywhere as they want.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, did you not say about your Accord there was like shit loads of room around that engine in the engine bay?
Oh yeah, I mean when I was like servicing the Accord, I could literally play a game of tennis under the fucking bonnet. It was ridiculous. Um, yeah, I mean I could get in the bonnet beside the engine. Get in the bonnet. I could get in the bay and shut the bonnet and basically crouch down beside the
Cover
engine.
beside the engine.
Yeah, there was not a lack of room. I mean the thing is, I'm a fairly hefty chap, not a fat cunt, but like I'm big. And I
Do we
can
have
work.
some stats on that?
Well, I mean, I'm 18 stone and I'm 6'4".
Yeah,
Yeah, but 18
big.
stone without a beer gut. Like, I'm big, but not fat. And, like, I can work on most Japanese cars without actually burning my hands or my forearms. Like, if I try to do that on an Audi, like, working down the side or the front of the engine, I'm, like, branding myself with radiator fins, or I'm rubbing my arm, like, against red hot fucking cheap Jubilee spring clips and pop hoses that are like 90 degrees. It's fucking excruciating. It's horrible. But I don't get that on Japanese cars. Obviously, just before some pedantic arse decides to comment and go, well, if you're working on an exhaust manifold, that'll happen anyway. I'm aware of that, but I'm generalising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. They're just fiddly. They're really fiddly and cramped. Is probably how I would describe them.
Yes.
And not necessarily any more reliable or robust from that.
I would agree. And if anything, I will say this for the JDM stuff, excluding like weird things like rotary engines. Well, they're not weird; they're fantastic. But excluding them and cars like the Mitsubishi GTO, which have a fairly undeserved, we'll say, spectre of unreliability that follows them. Generally, you're talking about cars that are actually pretty bulletproof in this era. Like the 2J, for example, is an absolute beast of an engine. Even a Supra in general, like there's not a great deal goes wrong with them, even to Skylines and stuff. I mean, the biggest thing issue you have is rust.
Yes.
Whereas the equivalent German car, like a 90s BMW, for example, I would not touch an S50 B32 M3. Like a late model, like an M3 Evo and an E36. I wouldn't touch one with a barge pole. They are fucking fragile.
Yeah. I actually totally agree with that. They're pretty reliable overall. And that could not be said for the equivalent like European or American car of a similar age.
No way.
It was weird. I remember being younger and like really kind of thinking to myself, it's like, what's going to happen? Because like cars are actually like, they seem to be kind of more reliable. From the stories that I got told by like my older family members, it seemed like their cars broke down all the fucking time. And like from when I was little, I do have memories of my folks' car breaking down all the fucking time as well. And like it just kind of got into the late 90s, and that never really happened again. And I stopped hearing like people never really call you to like I've broken down.
Yeah, I'll give you that. It's a very rare phone call now. I mean, I would say most things are going to be stupid things like electrical faults and running gear. And mostly, I think running gear, if you looked at it statistically, I think a lot of it would be caused by like hitting potholes,
Oh yeah,
hitting road debris, that sort of thing.
Yeah, heavy cars, uneven roads. There's a lot of like momentum there.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely like a big difference. But even still, like I was never stranded in 15 years of running pretty exotic Jap crap.
Yeah.
I was never stranded. I was never left at the side of the road. I could always get them home. But the couple of German cars that I owned in that same time period, I cannot say the same for.
That's so funny you say that, because I also have had issues with breaking down and not being able to get home with German cars. Even my little Ford, when it just decided that it was going to overheat now and that's all it was going to do, I still managed to get that home.
Yeah, like there's a lot to be said for being able to limp.
Yeah.
Definitely. Actually, I've got a question for you off the back of this, and it kind of harks back to the Fast and Furious, like what we were saying, the impact of it, and like how it kind of spiraled. Do you think that them being infamous, like the Supra, for example, and anything with a GTR badge, do you think it's a bit of a poison chalice? In that when they're affordable, everybody wants them, and quite a large selection of the everybody there are people who aren't necessarily bothered. They just want it because it's popular, and they're not really into cars, but it's the in thing to have. So they quite a lot get abused, and quite a lot don't get looked after. And then you've got the people who then further down the line start buying them, and the neglect gets worse and worse. And then eventually we end up in a situation where there's so few examples and so many people wanting them that you just have spiraling costs.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting question. I think I agree with some stuff in that. Like I agree that. Sorry, man, I've totally lost myself. What were we just saying? What were the last couple of points?
So that like the popularity causes everyone to buy them, but even people that aren't really interested.
See, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if I agree with that. I agree with that for some cars. Like, I think that like hot hatches often get bought by people who are not that into cars, but like
Fiesta ST. Pop and bang remap. Sorry, Tom, to continue.
I mean, like, yeah, I do know what you mean. Like, there's kind of the way you define if you're into cars or not, I suppose. Like, people who like want the cool car but don't necessarily give a shit about caring for the cool car and stuff like that. Yeah, I think there's probably a little bit of that. But like those examples, they're the ones that end up, fucking rusting away and go to the scrapyard. They're like I would say they're mostly the unsavables. If it's been genuinely owned by someone who just does not give a shit.
Yeah. I mean, there's an important little life stage of that car there that you forgot, that is just before the scrapyard, where it's where people like me and you buy them.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, I do and I don't, because I think it might actually depend on how you characterize somebody who's into cars.
Yeah, totally.
And for me, that's a much bigger question. But I would say, as a very broad stroke, you could characterize it by people that go to shows and people who have a vested interest in driving, like people who actually engage in the culture.
Okay, no, that is the distinction I think I can get behind, is there's some form of engagement in the culture. But then, like, if you follow someone on TikTok, that's like, I don't know, the UK's greatest pops and bangs, or I don't know, something of the like, you're still engaging with a form of car culture, And like, but then on the flip side, would you say that you've got some old boy who like has got his fucking, I don't know, he's got his Wolseley, he's owned it for a gajillion years, and he like maintains it himself in his old garage, which is like stepping back into 1950. And like he doesn't engage in any kind of car culture, but he spends most of his time caring for his car in like a really like kind of involved way. Like I would totally say that he's involved in car culture. He's just kind of doing it on his own in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that'd be fair. And to be fair, I think really the cutoff for engaging with it, I would say, is it has to be something that requires effort. You can't sit and doom scroll. Like going to a car show. Admittedly, you do get people going to a car show who really don't want to be there. 9 out of 10 times they're with someone who really wants to be there and they got badgered into it. But like, to engage like that, I think there has to be effort on both parts. So like a great example would be Gravity Show.
Yeah.
So like we went to Gravity, it was class, but there was a lot of people
good,
there that were just for clout, and like they were standing on the splitters of cars, and it's like, motherfucker, I would kill you.
Oh my god, there was so many people there just to take loads and loads of photos.
Which actually makes what I'm saying even more convoluted, because they aren't into the culture, I don't think. They're into the culture because it's a way for them to make money, or they're chasing clout, or they're trying to be something online that I don't care about.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That does make you sound very, very old.
Well, I mean,
you're not keeping up with the youth, Colin. You need to be contemporary.
I mean, fuck the youth. And I was saying that when I was a youth, so I blaze my own trail, Tom. I blaze my own trail.
Yeah, totally. Who you want? Who cares?
But no, it's a very interesting question, but it's not an easy to answer one, isn't it?
No.
Excuse me. Sorry, but I had to get a drink there. My throat was going dry. Right then, on to now.
Well, I was just going to carry on. I thought that you actually came to me and made me feel a little bit stupid that we hadn't really kind of thought about this before. But when you were saying that, it's quite hard to define car culture,
yeah,
it did kind of occur to me that in a way that's maybe kind of like a bit of the point of this podcast, like kind of the thesis statement of this podcast is to explore and maybe try and define what car culture is.
I would agree with that, actually, yeah. It's actually a bit embarrassing that we're like 45 minutes into our first episode and we've just discovered what the actual reason,
the point of what we're doing
and being for this podcast is.
But the important thing is we now know.
Yeah, that's it.
This was a teachable moment.
Absolutely. Now everyone knows. All of our 0 listeners at this very second.
So, to bring us back to the actual original topic that we started on many minutes ago, which was JDM Overpriced or Overhyped. I think we've talked about pretty much everything on the list apart from two kind of one legislative change and one cultural based thing. And I don't really know what your thoughts are on how impactful stuff like Initial D and the kind of like the anime and all of the kind of content and media that kind of surrounds that in Japan that's then kind of bled over everywhere else around the world through like kind of like the internet and stuff like that. Do you reckon that's had kind of an impact? Because like I'm gonna say something that might be a bit controversial, but I really don't give much of a fuck about the AE86. Like, you know, it's just a shitty economy box. Like, there's not really that much going on for it. Yeah, it might have. Okay, maybe it's great to drive. It can be great fun. Like, I don't know that, and I'd be willing to have my mind changed. But there's not. I don't really see the appeal apart from the fact that it's a famous, iconic car. It's like I don't really see the fucking appeal in the Volkswagen Beetle. I know people love them for many strange and unhinged reasons. Like all Volkswagen fans.
Yeah, I'm giving you that one. That's yeah, chalkboard one to us there.
Oh god, I've totally lost my train of thought now. I can't remember where I was going with that.
Your hatred of the AE86 and your absolute disregard for the hate mail that this will get us.
Yeah, I would say hatred's maybe quite a strong word, but indifference is probably where I would go with that, you know? Like, even thinking about it, it's like, oh god, out of all of the kind of like JDM stuff out there, like, that's like the dullest choice out there. Maybe, you know, okay, maybe some of the like 70s, like the 70s Skyline or the kind of early Z cars, you know, I don't really have to, like, what is it, the 270, 250, 280
240. Yeah.
240. Well, it was one of the few I didn't try. Yeah, it doesn't conform me. I mean, I think they look quite cool, but I don't think they're the prettiest cars in the world. I don't like they're not. They're old, quite old, so they'll be like, you know, I don't know. They just don't appeal to me. Whereas, weirdly enough, there's a lot of like old kind of weird British rot of that era that does kind of appeal to me.
See, I would go the opposite way there. I would much rather have a 240Z than a fucking MGB GT. The list
Oh,
of
I definitely
things,
have one over an MGB GT for sure. Yeah.
the list of things I would rather do than own a British classic is long and varied, and it involves dragging my testicles through broken glass.
Colin, you just don't hate yourself enough to enjoy a British classic.
I think that might be the root cause of my hatred of them there, to be fair. Yeah. No, I don't get the British class. How the fuck do we keep doing this? We're talking about
JDM.
JDM.
Totally
We're like on British classics.
I feel myself sitting here kind of eager to talk about British classics. Maybe that could be a conversation for the other day. Maybe I could put together a nice little presentation on why British classics are, I'm not going to say good, I think that's really overcommitting a little bit, but are worth considering.
Yeah, you do that.
Okay, okay then.
I'll put a counter argument together for why they're gash.
Yeah.
No, that works. Yeah, I mean,
I actually think we should totally do that.
yeah,
I think that
I'll give you this. Lotus exists for a reason, but we're getting so fucking dangerously off topic now that it's unbelievable.
We are, and we're getting into another one of my controversial car opinions, actually.
I mean,
I don't really care much for the Lotus Elise or the Elan. I think the Elantra is quite cool because it was weird as fuck, and I like the Europa, and the Carlton was good, but
I'm questioning everything I know about you right now, Tom. I can't lie.
I mean, the Exige is a cool car. Don't get me wrong, I like the Exige, but I don't. There's something about the Lotus Elise that I just, again, it doesn't appeal to me. I'd rather have a Vauxhall VX220 than a Lotus Elise.
It's the same fucking
I'd rather proudly say I own a Vauxhall than own a Lotus Elise.
Wow.
Yeah, there's something a bit wrong with that statement, but I that's genuinely like that's what I do.
I really like them, but I have no skin in the game because I can't fit inside them.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
No. Back to what you said though, anime and like Initial D being the big one. Yes, but initially it was quite a cult thing. Like
Yeah,
in the
definitely.
in the early 90s, like anime isn't what it was now. It was pretty niche, and there wasn't like this whole massive Japan fetish that everyone in the West has.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, it's the rise of the internet and global content distribution that's kind of made us aware of all the same stuff. Because it's like, that's why in the PlayStation games, that's why we know so much about, like, specifically cars that are like JDM only. Because they were in Gran Turismo. Like, they had all of the like JDM cars. They also weirdly sometimes had like the kind of European or US market equivalents.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting take on it, especially with like the used car dealership. It really did let like Gran Turismo play with the cars that they included, and it made for a much more interesting game as well.
I love a game where you can drive some like just kind of basic-y cars in like racing. Yeah.
Like you got some of like the unsung heroes. I mean, not really unsung anymore because everybody knows about them because it's a Skyline. But like a GTS-T or a GTS 25T in an R32 or a GTS-T, which is the RB20, like
the non-top spec ones.
Yeah, or a GTS, which is just like an RB25DE. Sorry, so it's like the non-turbo version of it.
Oh, right, yeah.
You could get them in Gran Turismo, and that was fucking cool. Like that was genuinely something cool to have. And like non-Type R Hondas, so like an SIR Integra, as opposed to a Type R or even a Type S. Like the way Gran Turismo done it with the models that you could have was actually quite interesting. I thought I really enjoyed that game, and that was quite a big part of it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It was like, it felt really intricate and there was so much variety.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that feeds back as well because like although I think at the time that like the anime and stuff that it was actually quite a niche thing. Like you like anime was niche and then Initial D was a niche anime inside an actual cultural niche at the time. So like it was few and far between when you actually spoke to people that knew it, and it was almost like a cult following that it had, and it was really small numbers. But now, because of the whole, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. This one, I don't know whether it really influenced it getting really big and hyped it up, or if the hype caused people to be into it.
Yeah.
But like now, whenever you see an 8086 at a show, it's in panda colors.
Yeah.
Tofu delivery card inside of it in kanji. It's just a clone of what's in Initial D. And do you know there's actually Driftworks, the company? I assume you're aware of who they are. They did a basically a drift car culture video called Driftworks Outsiders. It's on YouTube for free, and there's actually a bit in that about the influence of Initial D and stuff, and they actually talk about how it was quite a cult thing, and it was all like your pal showing you this video of Initial D, and they're like, oh my god, how cool is that?
Totally.
Actually really worth a watch if you haven't seen it, Tom, and anyone else who's listening.
Which Initial D version have you seen? Because I think there's quite a few. The one I watched was one a friend gave me that he got somehow, but it'd been dubbed over with like really aggressive like Euro bass. It was just absolutely fucking nuts. Because I later watched what was like the original kind of music and stuff. Yeah. And it's like there's a lot of periods where like it isn't really that intense on the music, whereas the version I watched was just banging all at the fucking time.
Yeah. I've not watched any of them.
So you've not seen Initial D?
Nah. Could not give less of a fuck about it.
Oh man, do you know what? It is not a particularly good film. It's not like well, I'm assuming you're talking about the live action one they actually made, not like the anime films.
No, I'm talking about like the cartoon ones.
Oh, right.
The live action
about the live action ones.
Will be rubbish.
Yeah, it is absolutely rubbish. But depending on the dub you get, it gets funnier and funnier towards the end because it makes less and less fucking sense.
Incredible.
Just on an aside, right? I watched this Jackie Chan film on Prime recently. It was called something like Attack God Operation Attack God of Armor or Operation Condor or something like that.
Right.
And it was dubbed, but in the process of watching it, we had the subtitles on, which was giving one version of the movie. Then there was a dubbing over. We could either have a dubbing over everyone but Jackie, because everyone was speaking English apart from Jackie Chan, who was doing his lines in Cantonese. Or you could have a dubbing of like this bored postman doing Jackie Chan's lines in the film and have everyone else in English. But either way, the subtitles were entirely different from what was being said, and it was a
Right.
really, really like it's such a like a really jarring kind of like almost like what's that expression for when you feel queasy? Like it just made you feel like kind of like unsettled. But it was really funny. I just realized it made it sound kind of way worse than it was more lighthearted than it made it sound.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I got totally lost there.
No, it's cool, man. Tangents are what we're all about.
So, shall we bring it back to the original question of why is JDM stuff so expensive? And like, I think I think your heading is bold. Not entirely. I don't entirely disagree either with "fuck you, America," and that's the 25. Is it the 25 euro?
Yes, and I think this is probably the single big, maybe not right now, but see when I like what maybe 7 years ago, this was the single biggest reason for price increase. And I remember the day Supras were legal to import to America. It was 2008 for 93. Was it? Oh, no, hold on. No, it was 2018. Sorry. I was like, I'd never owned a fucking Supra when I was 15. What the fuck? No,
Do you know what? I didn't even catch that.
no, I said it and then it was like, hold on a minute, big man, this ain't right. And I was like, it really fucking isn't right. But yeah, I remember the day they became live and it was like they jumped 25k in value overnight. And that's legitimate. Like they went from being cars that you could legitimately own, like you could probably get a twin turbo auto, a ropey twin turbo manual for between 7.5 and 12k.
Oh,
And
yeah.
literally overnight, 93 model years went to like 30 and 40 grand. And it got to absolutely ridiculous heights at one point where like they were trading hands for like 100k stateside.
Yeah.
And some of them still are as well. Like, and I have no idea how it's sustained and how there was actually enough people with enough of it. Well, I know why. It's because of Fast and Furious and American stupidity. But how it's sustained at that level, and even now, you still got people putting like an NA 5-speed or an NA auto up for like 30k.
I'm looking at one right here, 35 for a 96 the turbo manual.
Really?
Yeah, it looks modified like Rotherham as well if you're feeling particularly adventurous with your car buying.
Yeah, it's almost as bad as it being from Birmingham.
Yeah, they've kind of like diluted the there's one for 25 and it's not a turbo, it's just a 3 litre.
Yeah, I will say it is starting to cool off a little bit, but the damage was done for me anyway. Like I mean, not that I'm going to complain. I mean, it bought my house.
Aye, totally. Yeah, it's not like you came out of it bad.
No, because I bought the cheapest Supra I ever bought, which was £1,000 British for a non-turbo manual. Yeah, it was sketchy as fuck. I drove it like I bought it in Ireland. It was absolute sketch. I'll tell this story in a later podcast because we're getting away from the point. But yeah, I mean, I owned the cheapest Supra ever sold, and I'll stand my ground on that. I don't think there was a cheaper one sold with MOT in roadworthy-ish condition.
How did it have an MOT?
Because it was about to expire.
Oh right. I see. It was one of those sales.
Yeah. And like I made a small fortune. Like as I say, I bought a house selling that off in parts.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, the spike in prices actually extended to the parts because I remember the day before I put it all up for sale, and I was in the local takeaway with Jolly, and essentially we were on Facebook, and I was like, "Do you see this, Jolly?" He goes, "Yeah, man, it's a 14 grand Supra gearbox." a V160, admittedly. But and I turned around to him and I says, if that sells, I give up. It's getting to the point where we need a mortgage to replace parts that break on these. It's ridiculous. If that sells, I'm selling up. I'm getting out of the game. And the next day, I logged onto Facebook and Jolly had sent me this post saying it had sold. I was like, right, fuck it, I'm done. And everything went on the market that night.
Yeah, because you had a full car and you were actually restoring it as well. You're doing it up.
Yeah, like I was mid-respray on the shell. The engine was all rebuilt. I'd went to a 6-speed from a W58 5-speed. Yeah, I mean, I'd done a lot of work. That would have been one of the freshest models in the UK. Like all the steelwork underneath it was new. It had new sills, new inner sills. There was a lot of bodywork done. It was all prepped and sprayed. There was like 200 hours of prep in the bodywork alone. Like it was to be my forever car, and that happened. And I was like, no, I can't afford this.
I remember, I totally remember you always wanted that as like your kind of forever car. But no regrets. Like
no, absolutely no regrets. I mean, you can sleep in a car, but not comfortably.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Sadly, house is better than car.
Yeah.
You need it more than car.
I have to admit that is the issue. But yeah, no, man. Like back to the original point. Fuck you, America. That is that was a massive issue, and I will admit that it is starting to level off and kind of return to some form of normality now. But that was certainly a big push.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was even people like buying them when they were illegal and just storing them in the state to then sell when they became legal, and that's when they would put all the registration paperwork through.
Aye.
But it was a colossal problem for us, and actually even for Japan, because like you now have locals in Japan that just can't keep up with the demand. Like, the demand is pushing these cars so high and far above what the locals can afford that they can't have them anymore.
Yeah, totally.
And really, I think that's my big problem with JDM. It's not the overhype. I can live with that. It's the overpricedness, which is fed from the overhype, I have to admit. But like when you take a car that was meant to be fast and accessible for the vast majority of people, and you put it on a pedestal to the point where you can't actually afford it as a working man, it loses the point.
Yeah, and for me, it loses the appeal.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that was quite a nice way to round that off.
Yeah.
There's not enough car for the money sometimes.
Yeah, I mean that's on the point. It's not enough car. I think at the point where you're paying 85k for an FD3S, you're buying a dream.
Well, and I mean maybe that's fair. That's interesting though, because like maybe that is your dream, is just to own that car. It's just maybe not our dream.
Yeah,
is that why we're finding it hard to buy into all of this?
Yeah,
because we've both kind of said like you're kind of over JDM, and I kind of like got distracted by Das Automobile. So like we're not really the target audience. We just kind of watch from the sidelines. We're like, oh wow, that's $176,000 for a Mark IV Supra. That's
that's spectacular.
Yeah, that's like 10 times what I'd pay for a really, really good one.
Don't know. Like at a minimum 10 times what you would pay.
Are we maybe like just kind of imagining a time that only existed years and years ago and never came, when like you could get really quite interesting stuff for fuck all? And yeah, they had problems, but like you could still get a functioning car, sometimes with an MOT on it, for no that much.
Yeah, I think we are. Because there is a certain amount of romance about it when you could go out and buy a car with a year's MOT for 50 quid.
Totally, yeah. You could find some.
I mean it would be a dodgy MOT, but you could.
Yeah, you still had car.
Yeah.
Like, I think, when did they do the tax thing in the UK? When you didn't have to have your tax disc, so you could no longer transfer tax with a car. It had to be with, you had to like do that stupid thing where you cancelled it, and then the new owner had to reinstate the car tax.
Oh, no, that's a good question.
Maybe that's worth looking up online.
Yeah, it wasn't yesterday, but it wasn't 90s. It was early 2000s.
I'm putting it around that time as well.
In fact, yeah, it was early 2000s because Sorn came out at the same time.
Really, is Soren only that recent?
Yeah, like when yeah, I mean, I don't know because I've got cars and bikes that are off the road and I've still not fucking Sorned them. But yeah, Sorn came out early 2000s because I remember my granddad getting the first like warning letter for not having Sorned his car, and it was definitely early 2000s.
Yeah. When did Soren come online? Oh, I don't know. Do you know what? Oh, wait a minute. Vehicle Exercise and Licensing Act, 1994.
No, it must have been revised.
Yeah, but anyway, sorry. I'm not reading a fucking legislation.gov document in the middle of this podcast recording. That's a rabbit hole I do not want to go down.
No, we want to avoid that shit.
Yeah, definitely. But anyway, like, do you remember when you could transfer the tax with the car as well?
Yeah, man.
So like, you could actually buy cars for like less money than they had on them in tax.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
And they wouldn't be very good, but you could definitely still buy them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, yeah, I've bought some ropey motherfuckers in my time, and a lot of them were Japanese. But yeah, I remember those days, and it's not it. The fact that they're gone is just the nature of time.
Aye, totally.
But at the same time, like I remember in the early 2000s, not the early 2000s, the early 2010s, buying legitimate Jap metal Imprezas, J bodies, S bodies, for not a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like trading hands for a couple of £1,000 for an expensive one. And like back in the day, you could get like an S14A for £500 with an MOT, and it wasn't rotten, and it was a turbo, and it wasn't automatic. Like people genuinely didn't want them.
Yeah.
And when you've been through that, and then you see them go crazy, crazy money, and then it comes full swing back and it starts to calm down, but people are still pushing the prices high. It's like I can't get behind this, and it really does come back to my point about fast for the working man being put above the working man's reach.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe the same problem with like the kind of fast Fords as well.
Oh, absolutely. They're even worse for it than the JDM lot. Like, who the fuck wants to pay nearly £90,000 for a Mark II Ford Escort, Mark II Ford Focus RS?
Well,
They were
we saw
shit when they came out. They're shit now.
Yeah, we saw. Was it either a Mark II or a Mark III that was on advertised for? Was it £110,000?
Yeah, that was the one.
That's
So it was
that's
the
that's
Mark
that's a lot
II.
for a Ford Focus. That's a lot.
Yeah, and like the thing is as well, this isn't like some homologation special. This isn't some piece of automotive fucking rarity. This is literally a hot hatchback that 90% of the population in the UK used to go back and forth to Asda at one point.
Yeah, or just rag about everywhere
Yeah,
all the time
and
on
it
its
has
PCP.
and it has a Volvo engine in it.
Aye,
What's special about that? I mean, it's not even a good Volvo engine because the good Volvo engines had red blocks.
can't say. It's the 5-pot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a time when I would have liked Focus RS, but again, as time went on, it just kind of was like, still kind of a Focus, but also it's a Focus that when you run it anywhere, they're like, oh, all those parts, by the way, if you want to get like some kind of manufacturer parts, are going to be fucking really expensive because it's the sport. Like, it's the sporty performance version.
Yeah.
So it's, maybe I just need another car that's like shit and then one that's nice. And you use the shit for most things and you enjoy the nice one.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that's the optimum way of motoring.
Yeah. Everyone needs a £500 Volvo and a 10 grand 911. That's the takeaway from this.
Yeah, the Volvo's the really bulletproof, reliable one of the two.
Yeah, and the 911 is the one that sets your hair on fire occasionally when it works.
Yeah, it's a really nice day in summer. Oh, that was a good day last summer. Oh, got the car out.
Yeah, man. I think that hits the nail on the head for me. And I hate it because I'm just repeating a point I made previously. But when you take what was meant to be a really accessible, fun machine and you overhype it and overprice it to the point where it's on a pedestal and nobody can afford them, it takes the point away. And I also don't believe cars should be treated as an investment.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that as well. Like, you know, if you're gonna, I love cars. I would collect as many of them as my finances would allow. If I had more space to just kind of put stuff, but
Yeah.
I would want to be able to use them all as well. At least, you know, kind of semi-regularly. I don't want to sit on them as an investment. Sometimes I do like to collect things. It can be bad for collecting things. So I kind of understand that part of it, but yeah, the speculative side is just kind of a bit boring. It's not really engaging in the car. It's in just seeing it as an asset.
Yeah. Because I mean, I don't really care whether it's an S14A or a Ferrari F40 Competizione. They should be driven, and you should drive the tits off them. Like if you're babying it, it's a bit like not pumping your missus to keep her fresh for the next guy. You know, that's the same logic as taking a car off the road to keep the mileage down. It's a
Yeah,
depreciating asset. It's never ever going to, well, 90% of the time they're a depreciating asset. You don't buy something like that not to use it. You're in it.
totally agree.
You're in it. It's costing you money. It's costing you resources. Life's too fucking short. If it's costing you resources, it better be giving you fun, or it's not worth doing.
Yeah, I do. I completely agree with that. I totally agree with that. And on that, we could potentially talk about some cars that are actually still affordable that may fulfill a kind of niche.
Yes.
And I've kind of only really looked a little bit at like some JDM cars that don't really have the same price hike. And well, the two kind of most prominent examples I found were both Mazdas. There's the MX-5, which we both have opinions on as well, but you can't deny it's very popular. It's a decent little sports car. You know, if you wanted to just kind of, I suppose, get into it a little bit, it would be a good place to start. I just feel it's like one of those things you'd start with like the most basic gear, and then you get it really into it, and within a few months you're like, well, I really fucking regret buying the most basic gear because now I feel really limited by it.
Yeah. I mean, I have to give it to you because they do what they say on the tin, and they do them fucking well. As a fine handling car, they're up there. Like they're easily in the same vein as an Elise for handling purity. In fact, I would argue possibly even more so than an Elise because they're front engined, gearbox in the middle, limited slip diff at the back. Well, some of them do, some of them have an open diff, but front rear manual with a limited slip diff is the purest form of driver's car, bar none. A mid-engine might be technically superior, but I don't care.
I must
But
say,
have
I like a front rear as well. You know,
yeah,
it's a good. It's maybe not the best balance, but it's a good feel.
yeah, and that's really what it's all about for a driver's car for me. It needs to be tactile. It needs to have feedback. Having said all this, though, MX-5 is absolutely not the fucking answer every time. And that is my opinion on it. I fucking hate them. I don't. I actually kind of love them, but it's the fucking people that own them that I don't like.
Have you ever owned an MX-5?
I have not actually.
That's kind of saying something because you've owned almost everything else,
It's not far off, to be fair.
and then to a car that you have owned, the
Oh, the
RX-8,
RX-8, love it.
and yeah, they're pretty cheap still. But I do have a feeling we might know why they're really cheap.
Engine rebuilds.
Yeah, why? What happened to yours, Colin?
I handed it back to the finance company because it needed an engine rebuild.
Yes, there's. So I think you could. Yes, you can buy a cheap RX-8, but can you run a cheap RX-8? Is the question. Can you run any RX-8? Actually, might be a better question.
Well, I mean, I dailied mine for the best part of fucking 2.5 years,
Which
and
is really impressive.
it is. It's even more impressive considering I was an apprentice mechanic at the time and I wasn't making a great deal of money.
And when would this have been? Because what would fuel prices have been back then?
Oh, you're talking like £1.10 a litre. It was pretty cheap.
Okay, yeah. So not super cheap.
Not super cheap, but not like £1.70 a litre.
It used to drink oil as well. I remember you saying.
It wasn't too bad. A litre every 1,500 miles it took. But yeah, what a chassis though. What a chassis. Front midship, rear wheel drive, 6-speed manual, limited slip diff, a proper limited slip diff, and by that I mean not a fucking viscous one. Listen up, Nissan, they are not the thing for the job. Torsen or plated, pick one. Yeah, it just done everything that I wanted it to. It was practical. It was moderately fast for a 19-year-old coming off of a driving ban. Yeah, it was just good. It done everything I needed it to, but it done everything I needed it to at 13 mile to the gallon, which kind of put a dampener on proceedings. But yeah, I mean, I love them. They're an absolute darling of my car history, so they are.
I really liked yours as well. I thought it was they're a really cool car. The Wankel engine is really, really cool. I feel people that actively seek them out and to drive often are very brave, but maybe I'm slightly envious. Maybe I was like, oh, maybe I would like a rotary engine, but I don't know. Maybe I would like a rotary engine. Maybe that is what it is. Maybe I just feel I need to own a rotary powered car.
I think that, listeners, this is something we're planning for the future, is some video content. And I think this could be quite an interesting track day episode where we buy an RX-8, take it to a track day, and then try and improve the times and set a target and do something like that. I think that could be quite an interesting thing, because I want to own another RX-8 in the future, and you also want to experience owning an RX-8. And if we do that through the vehicle of a company owning it, where we can write nothing off against it, that sounds excellent, because it will lessen the financial impact of the mistake.
Yeah, soften those blows. Yeah, I've always wanted to be an employee of a company that owns a car.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to do when I was little.
Quality. Well, here we are, making dreams come true.
So they are two actual affordable JDM options. I would also like to just give a quick shout out to K Cars, because I fucking love them. I really think they're great and absolutely fantastic. I love the idea that them being really, really small and it's just a turbocharged 600cc.
Yeah, I mean, the motorbike I'm sitting next to in the garage has a bigger engine than that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think a K car is possibly something I would get a bit tired of after a while, but fucking hell would I love like a little Suzuki Cappuccino. My God, like such a tiny, cute little car. I love small cars.
I'm totally on board with what you're saying, but for me, it's like the Elise. I don't have any skin in the game because I can't fit inside the fucking.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, happily I've never run into a car that I don't fit into yet.
Yeah, you're not quite as proportionate.
No, I'm nowhere
as I am.
Nowhere near as kind of big.
No, it's like fucking. Just so like this is actually a little giggle for the listeners. So I'm in the midst of a Copart adventure at the minute, which is how I'm going to finance owning a 911. And I'm currently running around in a delightful little Peugeot 107, which is
for sale.
Yeah, it's for sale. And it looks like a fucking clown car when I get out of it. It's like, oh, there's a tiny little car, and the man who got out of it is fucking colossal.
Like the bit in The Incredibles at the start where he's like getting home from work.
That's it, yeah. Like, I get in the car, and the car actually visibly lists to one side. Like, the suspension is under strain. It's like, fucking hell. But yeah, no.
Not that the car's got any problems. It's been treated perfectly. One lady owner.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a solid little runabout for somebody. I'm not trying to sell that through the podcast, though. That's a bit on the nose.
It's honestly, to be fair, right, it's actually quite a nice little car, and it cleaned up really fucking well.
Yeah, I can work a polishing machine.
Definitely.
Well,
yeah, I think we've kind of probably about wrapped up on this. We've given people options of some JDM cars that they might want to own with significant drawbacks, which is why they're so cheap.
Oh yeah.
And we've talked about kind of some of the problems.
Well, that's us, folks. Thank you very much for listening. If you liked what you've heard, don't forget to leave us a like and a share. Share it to whoever you think might be interested. And also, if you could leave us a review, that would be excellent. 5 stars.